Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Conservative, not bitter indeed, my friends. It is an absolute pleasure to be with you here today. I should tell you as an order of housekeeping that I will not be in next week. You will be left in good hands, however. You'll be hearing from my good friend, Chris Dunham, and my good friend Gary Varvel. They'll be holding down the fort next week when I am out of town on a much-needed vacation with my family and traveling with my brother and sister-in-law as well. So that's where we'll be next week, my friends. You know, today I want to get to, in this first segment, excuse me, I want to get to a story that's been out there for a little bit that I haven't commented on just yet, but I thought today would be a good day to do that. There's a story of a surrogate who has refused an abortion after the child that she was carrying from the biological parents, as I understand it, received a serious diagnosis regarding a heart condition. And I want to talk about this in today's program. I want to talk about this. There's a lot of facets to this. Of course, at the core of this is the issue of abortion. And the left should join me in this, in defending the right of McKenna West, who is the surrogate, the one who is carrying the child, the right of her to, I guess if they want to be consistent, to do with her body as she sees fit here, which means that she carried the baby and did not have an abortion. This is just a lot of facets to this. I want to get to this. It's an important issue. That's what we're going to cover here in the first segment today, my friends. Before we do that, though, let me encourage you, if you haven't already, I know many of you have purchased products from MyPillow. They've been a partner of ours for, I think, 3, maybe 4. It's been several years now. And they, of course, are a patriotic company. Mike Lindell is an American patriot. He was running for governor of Minnesota. He came up short in the primary season. But he's got this company that he built from scratch, my friends. He built this company from scratch. He loves America. These products are made in America, and you can get sales prices on these products. And he's got a wide variety of products, including pillows, which, again, I use the MyPillow every night. 2 main reasons I've shared with you before. I have a big head, I have broad shoulders, and I like to sleep on my side, and the adjustable fill in that pillow fits perfectly under this big head that I've got, and that broad gap that these broad shoulders produces when I sleep on the side, on my side. And the other reason is it's got cooling technology. I don't mind being hot at any other part of the day. In fact, I love summer. Makes me a little bit sad here that we're getting towards the end of summer because I know what comes next. But I don't mind being hot much of the day, but at night I cannot sleep hot. And so having a pillow that doesn't overheat is a big deal. So they've got pillows, they've got towel sheets, they've got dog beds, they've got slippers. You can get discounts on those products. Sales with coupon code Todd during checkout. Again, mypillow.com, promo code Todd will get you discounts on the products there. mypillow.com, promo code Todd. All right, let's go through this. I want to keep this to the first segment today, as there's other things I want to get to in the latter portion of the program. But let me give you a little bit of background about this surrogate who has refused an abortion. She's the surrogate. She's not the biological parents, or one of the biological parents, she has been selected by the biological parents to carry their fertilized egg and to give birth to this child. And so there's an agreement, a contract that's entered into, and the people in this contract, excuse me, this is allergy season again for me, and I apologize for that. But nonetheless, McKenna West, she is an Alaska nurse, and she already has 2 children of her own. She entered what's called a gestational surrogacy agreement involving a California couple named Nasheen Gilkar and Omar Ahmed. So, Gilkar, I should say, as we understand it, is female. Ahmed is a male. And McKenna West, the nurse here, the surrogate, became pregnant through IVF, in vitro fertilization, and served as what's called the gestational carrier of the child. From what we understand, again, the egg was provided. It has nothing biologically, the DNA of the child does not have McKenna West's DNA. Or it doesn't include anything from West. I say just, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I just mean she was not the provider of any genetic material. She provided the environment in which the child could grow and develop and be born. So, according to the information available, what's public and so forth, the reporting out there, it's believed that the embryo was created using Gilkar's egg and Ahmed's sperm, but we're not entirely sure. That's what it appears to be. So Gilkar and Ahmed, the California couple, are the intended and the legally recognized parents per this agreement. The parents would name their son Rumi, and, well, there's more to this story, but West and her supporters call this child Gabriel. All right, so at 20 weeks into the pregnancy, the child was diagnosed with a condition called hypoplastic left heart syndrome, HLHS, for the purposes, well, it's called that, but for the purposes of this conversation to shrink the terms as well, HLHS. That occurs when structures on the left side of the heart do not fully and properly develop. And if it is not treated, the condition is generally fatal shortly after birth. So this was identified, this problem, this medical condition was identified at 20 weeks, halfway through the pregnancy. So, modern treatment gives the child, well, there's 3 basic, I guess, staged operations for what this treatment looks like. The first stage is called the Norwood procedure. This is generally given during the first couple of weeks. The Glenn procedure, which is 4 months to 6 months, and the Fontan procedure, generally between 18 months and 3 years. These operations are designed to reroute blood flow, but they do not create a normal 2-ventricle heart, and it doesn't mean that the patient is completely cured. They're often, typically, patients who have this condition require ongoing, lifelong care from specialists. I'm just giving you the information here so that you can understand what's going on. So, HLHS is a very serious, life-threatening condition, but it is treatable. It is treatable. Survival figures, again, vary depending upon who you ask. But I've heard, in fact, Children's Health in North Texas reports 100% survival since 2020 among children undergoing what's called its Sano version of the Norwood procedure. This, you can get in the weeds really quickly here, but basically it is a very serious condition. It's life-threatening. It's treatable. It's not completely curable, but it can still, of course, take the life of a child at a young age. So, looking at my notes here, Texas Children's reported 93% overall survival at 1 year in its 2017 and 18 Norwood experience. So listen, they've survivability in the early stages of treating this are generally high. However, so the parents, the legal parents, who we believe are the biological parents, not the one who carried the pregnancy, but the two individuals who provided DNA effectively to create this child. After consulting with doctors and researching, they decided they wanted the surrogate, who again, her name is McKenna West. They decided that they wanted her to terminate the pregnancy. And again, so they have this contract. And in the contract, I believe there is a clause that allows this to happen. So, they went through this process. They talked with West, and according to the court reports and the court findings and everything I can find reported, West initially agreed to have an abortion, and it's believed that she personally made an appointment for that abortion. Now, I want to pause here and tell you, I made this clear on this program. I'm definitely pro-life, but I'm actually an abortion abolitionist. I think abortion should be made illegal. Full stop in this country. I understand that there are incredibly difficult cases. It's a very small percentage where there are some very difficult things. Rape, incest, and the life of the mother. Now, I'll take the biggest one out of that first, which is the life of the mother. Obviously, there's not a person out there who it's a false narrative here. It's a straw man argument. There's not people out there who's saying that the mother should die in pregnancy. Of course, everyone wants the mother to be safe and to be saved medically. So if there is a condition that says, listen, the mother's life is in jeopardy, you don't have to kill the unborn child. There's doctors that talk about this out there. You don't have to take my opinion here as a highly trained broadcast specialist and podcaster here, but you can go look this up yourself. You don't have to kill the unborn child to save the mother. You try to save both. This is common sense. So sometimes you have to do a C-section, emergency C-section operation to remove the child, and then you try to save both. That's what you do. That's what you do. It doesn't even make sense. It puts more people at risk to terminate the child than it does to just remove the child and try to save both. So that's a false argument. That's something that is designed to create an emotional argument. And these other things, listen, it doesn't mean that they're not real, that this comes up, but what it does mean is that when it does come up, there's an obvious solution to this, and that is to try to save the lives of both people. So rape and incest, again, that's another situation where people say you should not be forced to look at your rapist child for the rest of your life and so forth. I'm sympathetic. It's terrible what happens. We should punish, of course, the rapists who do these atrocious things. I would say that if you care about the mother as well, truly care about the mother, you would counsel her not to add more trauma to herself by killing her unborn child. And there are other solutions. It's a terrible position to be in. I get it. It's awful. But the idea that killing the child is somehow going to erase the memories and the trauma created by the rape is simply not accurate. What would be better done is to help women to avoid adding to the trauma by killing their unborn child. Anyway, so that's my position. I think too, I want to say this. I say this as much as I can on this program when we talk about this issue. If you've had an abortion, this is not intended to heap salt on a wound. I happen to know, I've talked to women who actually used to be part of a group where they would help one another. Women who had had abortions, they would get together years later to try to heal from this. Listen, God is able through Christ to forgive you. This is not about condemnation. This is about stopping this heinous thing from happening again in the future. So if you are suffering from that, and if this is an emotional thing, I am sorry for that. I don't mean to open up a wound, but these things are happening out there in our culture and society, and we have to do our best to stop them. And there's healing in Jesus. That's the other thing that I want you to know. And by the way, if you have questions about that, I can connect you. If you're someone who has those problems, you can text 317-785-1030, and we will get you in contact with people who can help you, who can tell you about Jesus, but can also help you heal and find women as a support group. Those things exist out there. Okay, so moving on here. So West denied the abortion after having the initial meeting or setting the appointment. She refused to undergo the operation. Her attorneys allege that the intended parents then spent weeks trying to pressure her to terminate the unborn child. They, the parents, the biological parents, dispute that they attempted to do that. So, the dispute concerns the nature of the pressure placed on West, whether she violated the contract, and what authority the intended parents actually have after West withdrew her consent to have said abortion. So, West cut off contact with the parents, biological parents, the ones that she was serving as a surrogate for. She moved from Alaska to Texas, a very pro-life state. She worked with the assistance of a group, a pro-life organization called Live Action. She sought recognition as the child's mother, and she sought the authority to protect that child and to obtain medical treatment for the child. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton stepped in and intervened. He alleged that the intended parents might refuse the life-saving treatment following the birth of this child. The parents, of course, deny this allegation, but nonetheless, it's in court. We've got her. We've got the surrogate who's now living in Texas trying to protect the child. It's gotten messy, to say the least. So they say they had consulted specialists, the parents, and intended for the child to receive the continuing cardiac care in California. A Texas judge has ordered that the newborn receive medically necessary life-sustaining care. I believe the child, who was born August 12th, just a couple of days ago, 8 days in fact, the child was 2 weeks early, and listen, he was placed in the custody of Gilcar and Ahmed. It's a complicated situation. So the parents were authorized to make medical decisions within the limits of Texas's emergency order, requiring the necessary care that the judge issued. The attorney said the child was receiving that care from pediatric specialists. West was prevented from seeing or even holding the child under a temporary restraining order obtained by the parents. The parents say West's relocation to Texas forced their son to begin treatment away from the specialized cardiac care specialists in California that they had wanted. Messy situation here, my friends. So, I believe $60,000 changed hands is what I've seen here regarding this situation of her being the surrogate. So that's kind of where we stand. So lots of questions that are raised here. Lots of questions. Can the gestational carrier, the part that West played, provide binding advance consent to an abortion? So meaning, if I'm the biological parents, can I put into a contract that you actually have to terminate this child if the parents say that you have to? That's a listen, you can see all the problems that this creates. Then you've got the fact that the agreement was entered into. And then you've got to say, listen, now that it's entered into, I agreed to these terms. What's a court supposed to do here, right? That's why the move was made to Texas, because the law is pretty clear that the life is going to be protected of this child. So now you've got parents who wanted to abort a child who are now in custody. The child is placed in their care. They're responsible legally to provide the cardiac care for this child. So you've got that situation where now it's going to be well known and established that this child, the parents who are currently raising this child, wanted this child to be terminated. And this is just a messy, messy situation from a lot of angles. And it goes to show, among other things, just how awful this entire debate has become. We're talking about the lives of people like this little boy who was born, who they didn't want. The parents didn't want to be born. And listen, I try to be fair to them, even though I'm very strongly on the side of life here. It's just a tough situation for everybody. But this should serve to illustrate what is at stake. What's at stake when lives are terminated inside the womb prior to that child being born. This was not West's, the gestational carrier, the surrogate mother's egg, and the public record does not establish whose egg and sperm this was, though we think it was the other couple's. Her defined role was to be the carrier, to deliver the child per the parents' wishes. But now the child gets a serious diagnosis. The woman carrying him refused to go along with the abortion that the parents wanted. She continued that pregnancy. She had that child. She crossed state lines. She found a state that was favorable to the pro-life movement. And so you've got that whole thing. You've got this condition, HLHS. It's neither a minor thing nor an automatic death sentence. So now you've got the whole thing about genetic testing of the child who's in the womb, and parents who look at abortion or really the development of their child as though they're selecting the color of carpet in a home or the make and model of a car. This stuff, technology has gotten us to the point where this is even, maybe, I don't know if I want to say it completely, but arguably more problematic with some of these sorts of things. So that's happening out there, my friends. That's in the news. I wanted to keep you abreast of what's happening, but I'm out of time here in the first segment of the program. So we'll switch gears in the next segment, my friends. You're listening here to the home of conservative, not bitter talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff, back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Want to shift gears here as we head into the second segment of today's program. There's a lot of arguments out there. Today about the type of government that America should have, the differences between capitalism, free market capitalism, socialism, communism, all these sorts of things. And listen, we can go through the textbook definitions of these things, and I think it's important to understand that. But I think it's even more important to take a step back before that, to talk about the motivations and the thoughts that each group who adopts their particular political ideology and philosophy, what they're actually, what their motivations are, what their priorities are, how they view the world. I've said before, and I'll say again, this needs to be understood. Politics is downstream from culture. Culture is downstream from worldview. Worldview is how you choose to look at the world, what you believe matters about this world, what you believe about freedom, what you believe about the authority of the state, what you believe is acceptable, an acceptable amount of force to apply to people living in your community and your state. So I want to go through this. It matters a lot. It matters a whole heck of a lot. And it's going to show up on your ballot here in November, my friends. So, ever wish you had a whole team to help manage your financial life? That's the beauty of family office services at Full Suite Wealth. Their experienced advisors bring together everything from high-level investment management, private equity, private credit, option strategies, to complex legal needs, all customized for you, my friends. It's like having a family office just for you with people who know your story and your goals. If you're serious about planning for the long haul, check them out, Full Suite Wealth at fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy. Secure your future. So let's start here, this segment, textbook definitions between capitalism and socialism. This matters tremendously. You have a lot of people out there clamoring for socialism. And then when you say to them, what do you mean by socialism? They say, well, I like having a fire department, a police department, public highways, that sort of thing. And of course, that's not what socialism is. Socialism is when property or it's usually both, economic production under collective control. So this is where the state would own, people would say, the means of production. So the state would own everything. Collectively, we have, of course, the socialists would say that collectively we are the state. We, the people, form the state. Capitalism, free market capitalism, says, no, we need to have private ownership, private property. This is a bad term to the socialists. And capitalism believes in the voluntary exchange of people in the marketplace. That matters a lot. That technically matters. But that fails, I think, to resonate with people when you talk about the means of production. It just sounds so, I don't know, it doesn't sound like it's something that the average person can latch onto and get their head around. And it also doesn't really get to the heart of the problem, which is the difference in the mindset of each political ideology and philosophy. So the real disagreement is about ownership. It's about consent. It's about force. It's about liberty, my friends. Who owns what you produce? Who owns the product of your labor, my friends? Who has a claim, a legitimate claim to the things that you have produced? Under what circumstances, if there are any, can someone else or the government then take that from you? Those are the questions that have to be answered here. And so as a conservative, which I am here, you own, I believe, the product of your labor. It doesn't belong to somebody else. You did the work. You developed your abilities. You took the time and the energy to learn and to improve your skill set. You're the one that used your property, your money, your investments, or maybe they're investments that you got from other people, but you went out and you made a pitch. If you have a business, you took the effort. You made the steps to get the support of other people. Whatever the case, you creatively produced something. The first thing we know about God in the Bible, in the beginning, God created, right? It's one of the first 5 words in the Bible is created. God created. God made us in his image. God is creative. We are too. You did the creating. It belongs to you. It is under your stewardship. So that means that you can sell your labor to an employer. You can start a business. You can purchase something from another person that they have produced at an agreed upon price. So both sides agree, I'm going to sell it for this, I'm going to buy it for that. You can negotiate that price of a product without the government interfering. There's not some price book that God has in heaven that says, well, you want to sell product X, let me see, it should be sold for this amount. That's not how this works. It's the value is based upon what each person on each side of the transaction places in that particular product or service. You invest your money. You can save it. You can spend it. You can do whatever. You can give it away. That's something else that's missed oftentimes amongst conservatism, conservative thought. The left doesn't get that at all. Charity. Conservative people are amongst the most charitable people that you will find. It's not that conservatives don't believe in helping people. They believe they have a problem with force and coercion. They have a problem with an entitlement mentality. They want to actually help the person who is in receipt of the charitable giving to actually solve his or her problem, to improve his or her circumstances, not to be a permanently dependent individual on that charitable giving. Many conservatives or free market capitalists believes that you could use your money to support a church, a ministry, a family, a neighbor, a charity, someone in your community, you name it. But the government generally has no legitimate reason to interfere with any of that stuff unless it violates another person's life, liberty, property, pursuit of happiness. Laws should be designed to hold fraudsters accountable, to enforce legitimate contracts. We talked about that a little bit last segment. Protect innocent and vulnerable people. We talked about that. That's a big part of what we talked about last segment. We want to prevent or deter people from engaging in theft or violence or exploitation or coercion, any of those things. You can't prevent all of that, but you can have justice for people, when people do those things. So the socialist mindset is totally different, and I'm not going to have as much time to get into this as I would like. But what they believe is what you produce is not exclusively yours. If another person, if another group that's been designated by the government comes along, and if they are judged to need what you have produced, and they'll make arguments for this is why I need it, it's why you should produce it. You hear all sorts of arguments about this. You hear arguments such as, you are wealthy, you have exploited me, you owe me a free education, you owe me free health care, whatever the case may be. You have to provide this because of something that you have done, or no one deserves that much wealth. What are we doing? You can't have that much money. They should be outlawed. Billionaires, people would say, should be outlawed. And that's the whole purpose of socialism, is to try to make the argument for why someone else deserves the fruit of your labor. Your consent is ultimately unnecessary to these folks. They are completely prepared to use force to get you to give them what they say that they deserve. In fact, this is where they lean into the idea of democracy, because if they can confuse, you can make the case confused, but if they can persuade people, convince people, enough people, a majority of people, that what you have belongs to them, or what you, the wealth that you have created should then be used to provide them something else. And listen, sometimes the them is a third party. So you'll have a politician come in and say, I think this person should be taxed so that this group over here gets whatever it is that I, as the benevolent dictator in society, says that they need or that they're entitled to. And so you say, well, there's someone there that's just benevolent. They don't, they're trying to help somebody else. No, they're trying to win votes to have the power, to have the authority, to have the prosperity that comes from being inside the belly of the beast. And so I was hoping to get to more of that this segment. I'm going to continue this into the next segment, my friends. I think this is important to understand, and we'll do that here, my friends, in the next segment. But here's a question for you in the meantime. Do you know where your money goes after you spend it? If the answer makes you cringe, my friends, it's time to check out Freedom Marketplace. Freedom Marketplace is a platform that we built to connect conservatives like you with businesses that share your values, businesses that have vowed, and they will refuse to support leftist candidates, leftist causes. It is free for you to use. There's no login required, though you certainly can create one. It's all about keeping your dollars aligned with your principles and values. FreedomMarketplace.net, that's where you can go. Check that out today. FreedomMarketplace.net. Liberty and business for all. Time out for me, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Third final segment of the program, continuing what we talked about in the previous segment. My friends, talking about the difference between the socialist mindset and the values of free market capitalists, conservatives like me. I think this is important to understand. It's easy to get into the weeds. A lot of people get confused about the differences and definitions, terms like the means of production. I'm talking about the fuel behind the ideas, what pushes people to be conservative or socialist, leftist, whatever. That's what we're talking about here today, my friends. But if you're curious about Kratom, just trying to figure out who you can trust, take a look at Christopher's Organic Botanicals, family-run company. They offer natural kratom that's been lab tested. It is not synthetic. It's not that synthetic garbage that's given kratom a bad name. Real kratom is responsibly sourced. It's natural. It's tested for purity. That's what Christopher's is all about. They work directly with farmers in Indonesia. They follow the same traditions that have been trusted for generations. There are no gimmicks. They take no shortcuts. It's just a clean, honest alternative for people looking for a more natural way to support their health. So, a good place to begin is their Kratom Starter Pack. You can check that out. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. And if you use my name, first and last name, Todd Huff, you will get 10% off your first purchase. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Let's get back to this in the time we have remaining here, my friends, talking about the mindset of socialism, that what you produce doesn't belong to you. It belongs to other people. Your consent, what they take from you, isn't ultimately necessary. If they get a majority of people, 50% plus one person, they can take whatever that 50% plus one, the majority says that they can take. And listen, government can take through taxation, they can take through penalties, confiscation, regulation. There's a bunch of different shapes that this can take. But ultimately, they take it, and if the majority says that they're justified, that's totally fine. That's all they need. But they have to use and rely upon coercion. That's exactly what they have to have, my friends. So, again, I've said before, and I'll say again, if putting your hand, I talked about Walter Williams saying this in the past, if me taking my hand and putting in your back pocket and removing your wallet is theft, why does it, and that's wrong, and it is, by the way, what suddenly makes it right if I have a majority of people get together and say, listen, a majority of us have gotten together and we're going to empower a third party, the government, to come in and put its collective hand in your back pocket and take it out. How is that not theft? How is that not the same thing? Walter Williams would argue that it, in fact, is. A majority vote does not change the underlying nature of the act. That's exactly what's happening through socialism. And by the way, all that democracy means when you're talking about socialism is that you've convinced a majority of people that stealing is cool and okay and acceptable and justified. See, our founders talked about liberty. They talked about liberty, freedom. They talked about people being able to live in accordance with how they were created by God, with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness being some of the biggest ones there. So this is a great deviation, a great turning from what the founders had established in this country. Make no mistake about it. The socialists accuse conservatives and the free market capitalists of being greedy, my friends. But who's the ones who are really being greedy? Conservatives resist government redistribution, but is that greedy? Is it greedy to want to keep the product, what your own labor has produced? Isn't it greedy to demand that someone else, the product of their labor, be used for your priorities or for you personally? Isn't that, my friends, the definition of greedy? The socialist would say that person has more than I believe he needs. He has more than someone else has, so therefore it's only fair to take it. I'm entitled to take it because I'm benevolent and I'm here with altruistic motives and so forth. This, of course, is a recipe for disaster. It has been throughout history. Not only that, it's not generosity to give away someone else's money. That is not charity. Charity is when you look into your heart, your pocketbook, open it up, and give as you feel led to give. It's not charitable for me to tell you that I'm going to give away your money. First, I have to take it. Why is it charitable to take someone else's money? Why is that a good thing? This is exactly what the idea of socialism is built upon. It is a prerequisite, a requirement for the people who are falling in love with socialism to believe that force is good, that you are not the owner of what you produce, that society is somehow universally a steward of what you've produced. That is absolute lunacy. And see, we know this too. You've seen some of the questions asked during these man on the street interviews where they go to college campuses and they say, you believe in socialism? And of course, these students dutifully say, yes, of course I do. And then they say, well, why don't we do that in the classroom? Why don't we assign grades that way? I mean, it's not fair that some person gets all the A's. What about the person who gets the D's and the F's? Why can't we give some of the points that have been accumulated by the person who gets the A's and reassign those to the person who gets the F? And inevitably the person would say, because I worked for that grade. Well, there you go. You understand it, my friends. But I'm out of time. Got to run here. SDG.